In the last episode of Project Scirocco, we moved my 1985 Volkswagen Scirocco that had been sitting at my parents' house for the last 15 years out of the elements and into my garage. I have to admit, it was a pretty weird experience to see a good friend come home after so long. A few days later, Parker and I rolled it out of the garage and gave it a quick wash to remove years of exterior dirt and muck, and I started in to give it a quick vacuum inside and out. With a new battery installed, the car had absolutely no power anywhere, and I decided to take a gamble and replace the ignition switch, which required that I remove the steering wheel, turn signal, and windshield wiper switch assemblies. A short while later, I had replaced what turned out to be a visibly failed ignition switch and had performed the first repair on the car. And lo and behold, I restored electrical power to the Scirocco for the first time in a decade and a half. I have to admit, it was a pretty awesome feeling, and it definitely has encouraged me to push on. Right, hey guys, back for another run at bringing this Volkswagen Scirocco to life. Today I'm going to focus on trying to get this thing prepped to start. And what I want to do is replace all of the items in the ignition circuit. So I want to put in a new coil, I want to put in new plugs, I want to put in new plug wires, we'll probably put in a new rotor and a new distributor cap. We'll probably think about changing the oil and swapping out the air filter just to take a look at what it looks like. When we're all done with that, I want to get the tank opened up, the gas tank opened up, and take a look at the fuel sending unit and as well as the pre-pump that's in there to see what sort of condition they're in before we actually put some more gas in and try to start it. So with that, I'm going to dig into the ignition system.
Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening.
Alright, so let's see, I've got a bunch of parts, some plugs, I've got a rotor, this is the coil, distributor cap, this is actually an ignition module, I forgot to mention that, the ignition module, and then I've got some plugs, plug wires. Okay, before you replace the spark plugs, it's a good idea to consult your owner's or aftermarket service manual for the correct size of the gap. A spark plug gap is the distance between the center and side electrodes, and it's important to set it to the manufacturer specification so electrical arcing occurs at the right voltage that ignites the fuel and generates the combustion that makes the engine run. As you can see from the owner's manual, the electrode gap for this car is shown as a range between 28 to 32 thousandths of an inch. Now the plugs I purchased claim to come pre-gapped to the correct specs for this vehicle, but I'll give them all a quick check just to be sure. Now, if you've never checked the gap on a spark plug, there's a couple ways of doing it. Here I'm showing a circular ramp gap gauge in which the outer edge increases in thickness corresponding to spark plug gap distances. How you use this tool is to place the gauge in between the electrodes and rotate the plug around the gauge until it stops. When the plug can't move any further, the number corresponding to where the plug stopped is the gap. A second type of gap gauge is shown here, and it consists of multiple wires of differing diameter. As you can see, each wire is labeled with its own diameter, and there's typically a range in each one of these tools. The concept is the same. You simply pull the wires between the electrodes to determine the gap. If you need to adjust the gap up or down, this tool comes with a pry bar sort of deal to physically bend the upper or side electrode to the desired gap. Okay, so it looks like these plugs are all gapped at 28 thousandths of an inch. That's within the specification shown in the owner's manual and is actually shown as the gap plus or minus 4 thousandths of an inch in the Bentley service manual. So we'll keep them all where they are. Alright, to replace the spark plugs, you simply remove the spark plug wire, pull it straight off, unscrew the plug from the block, and screw the new one in. Since I'm preparing this car for an initial start and it hasn't been started in a long time, I'm not going to torque them all in, but the manual actually says to torque the plugs to no more than 15 foot-pounds. I replace one plug at a time to ensure that I attach the right spark plug wire to the right cylinder. If you get the wires mixed up, you'll change the firing order of the engine and you don't want to do that. Okay, so next it's time to replace the spark plug wires.
You'll notice when you remove them from the box that they are not all the same length and that each wire varies in length depending on the distance from the distributor cap to a given spark plug. Before we can install the new wires, we are also going to remove and replace the distributor cap and rotor. Right, so here's the distributor cap on this car. And you notice that each one of these wires goes to a certain cylinder, goes to a certain spark plug. And each one of these wires is also a different length. So I've laid them out here, and I've also done a quick diagram on the distributor cap before I take it off as to which wire goes to which cylinder, so that when I put it back on, it will go back on in the right firing order. It's always good just to put down on a diagram what you're looking at before you rip it all apart and then have a problem getting it back together. So with that, I'm just going to remove the distributor cap, and it's held on with two clips. There's a metal clip here and a metal clip in the back, and those should be able to be just pried off with some flathead screwdriver. And then the cap replacement should be 1-on-1. While the distributor cap is off, now is the time to replace the rotor, which is shown here. So if you're unfamiliar with their purpose, distributor caps and rotors are responsible for passing the voltage from the ignition coil to the spark plugs. The rotor is an electrical contact that actually physically rotates within the distributor cap and provides energy to the spark plugs in a set sequence called the firing order. To remove the rotor, simply pull it straight up and it'll come off. You'll notice a key on the shaft. To install the new rotor is simply as easy as aligning the key and pressing it down. While the old rotor and cap look pretty good, these parts handle somewhere between 20,000 to 50,000 volts in a high temperature environment inside the engine, and are prone to break down over time. It's just being cautious and replacing them up front. After cleaning the electrical shield, which is the black part, simply slip the new distributor cap in, noting the position of the old cap. Then, using the diagram I made, I attached the right length plug wire to the correct position on the distributor cap and attempted to snap the cap back into place. Okay, so I had one heck of a time getting that distributor cap back on. It's got two metal prongs, little clips that you've got to pull up and over to secure the cap down to the rotor. And there's limited room in there. I couldn't get my screwdriver off into them. I couldn't get a pair of pliers onto them. They were pretty easy to get off because they were under quite a lot of tension, so they just sprung right off. But putting them back on was an issue. So I played around for a little while with trying to get needle nose on them or get regular pliers on them, get the screwdriver in there, and that wasn't working. So what I decided to do was just get a piece of wire, and I looped it over, and I stuck this loop under where that spring was, like this, tied off this top, and then I was able to get enough tension on it that when I pulled it up, that spring went up and over onto the cap. So if you're having trouble getting those retainer clips back on, whatever, distributor cap or whatever it may be, this is a good trick to use. Once I got the cap back in place, I simply attached the right wires to the right plugs via the sketch I made earlier. Okay, onto the ignition coil. An ignition coil is an induction coil in an automobile's ignition system that transforms the battery voltage to the thousands of volts needed to create an electric spark in the spark plugs. So here's the old coil I'll be replacing. It's mounted on the firewall behind the throttle body and intake. Not a whole lot of room to work with here. In fact, I don't have any video of me removing it because, quite frankly, there were a lot of four-letter words coming out of my mouth during the process.
Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
All right, so I got this old coil off. There was two connectors on the bottom down here of this three-prong connector, and then one big connector that you saw on the top. Now, what was interesting is when I looked at the new coil and tried to install it, the connectors that went on the bottom, these three, are single prongs that go on, but the top connector is one connector with two prongs, and it wasn't going on, and I was stumped as to why. Well, if you take a look, this connector is canted on two sides, so it kind of goes up and out and up and out, and the old one is straight up and down. So you can see this connector straight up and down. You really can't bend this to straight up and down to match the size needed to go into that connector, and I was stumped until I looked, and lo and behold, look, there's a nut and there's a nut. So all I'm going to do is take this lead off and put it on this one, and then my connector problem should be solved.
And here's the new coil installed. Again, I have no video of the installation due to an extreme potty mouth promoted by a lack of room to work with. My hands appeared to be too big and the space too small, but I made it work. Anyway, the last thing to do was to attach the wire from the coil to the distributor cap. And with that, and with the exception of replacing the ignition module, which I may do later, this car now has all new ignition parts. Thunderbolt and lightning. Very, very frightening. The air filter is located in a plastic box right behind the battery and is held together by a couple spring-loaded clips shown here. And they're as easy as popping them off with your fingers, or there's two in the back that require a screwdriver. Once they're loose, you can just go ahead and pull the top part off, pull out the filter, and take a look. And as it turns out, apparently I had replaced this filter sometime in the past because it looked brand new. So really no need to replace this filter. Assembly is the opposite of disassembly. Pop the filter in and attach the clips, and you are set.
That's not a lot, but
my dad's doing a wrench. I don't exactly know what he's doing with the wrench. I can't see.
gonna drain whatever oil is left in this thing.
Oh, I can see the oil coming out. If you can see that, guys, that like thing is the oil. Zoom in on it. Not exactly used this. Yeah, that's the oil.
15-year-old oil.
That is a lot of oil.
So cars typically take about 5 quarts of oil. When you do a oil change at home, you'd want the engine to be warm, but since I haven't started this engine yet, we're going to drain whatever's in there, and then we're going to replace the filter as well. Here's the drain plug. I do not see a crush washer. Oh, there it is. You'd probably usually put a new crush washer on here, but I'm just going to replace this one as it is. So I'll let this drain for a minute. But it is dirty underneath there. Boy, we washed the outside, but it is full of leaves and spider webs.
And cobwebs.
All sorts of dirt down there. Once we get this thing running, we'll have to take it somewhere and do the undercarriage.
And I'm arachnophobic, so I ain't doing that.
So on a VW, the oil filter's right up here in the front. It's pretty easy to get to. So let's take a look. Right down there. That's it. You can get to it from the bottom, which is what I'm going to do. So it looks like a Fram from last time. And let's see if you take a look from underneath here. It is dirty down here. And right there, this is the bottom of the filter. So pretty easy to get to in these cars.
So sometimes if the filter isn't on too tight, you can get it off by your hand. But most of the time I use one of these oil filter ratchets, which has got some prongs and really grips into the filter, and you can unscrew it that way. Okay, so here's the new filter. Make sure that you got the right filter for your car. It's got a rubber gasket around the outside that you can see right there. Take a little bit of the old oil and just get some on your finger and lubricate up that oil gasket a little bit. And then screw the new filter back on. Put it a little bit past hand tight, but don't over tighten it.
Okay, so that's all there is to draining your oil and putting on a new oil filter. So the next thing you got to do after you get your oil filter on is just fill her back up with oil. Make sure you look in the manufacturer's spec if you've got the owner's manual, and I do. We'll take a look at how many quarts of oil it'll take. Okay, so if you got your owner's manual, and we do, you go to the page where it says technical information and capacities, and right here it is. Engine oil with a filter change is 4.8 quarts. So we'll see what it'll take. And you have to look in here on what weight of oil. This VW takes 20W50. Okay, so let's see, I forget where the dipstick is on this car. Oh, it's right here. You know, it showed that it was full. Can you see this?
I don't know what that means, but it looks like it's like chainmail from Minecraft.
So it looks like it was full, which is a good thing. It looks like it was full, so it looks like a good thing.
I don't know what any of this means.
So let's see what we can get in there. It said 4.8 with a oil filter. This jug is 5 quarts, so that would be just a tad less than that. And a lot of the times, yeah, and this one does, if you're not familiar with changing your own oil, these big jugs will have a part where the plastic is basically translucent, and as you drain the oil, you can take a look and it'll show you what level you're at. So if we were to go all the way down to here, that means that we put 4 quarts in.
And I can already tell that, show me the oil? Like the oil can stop having oil right there.
You can see the level, right? I'm moving it.
Yeah.
You can see the level.
Yeah, it just goes up, down.
Yep. Okay. All right, you want to do this slowly because it can make a mess. But there you go. Look how nice and clear that oil looks compared to the black stuff that came out.
That's what oil usually looks like.
That's what brand new oil looks like. And over time, as the engine heats up, it breaks down the oil and it turns it black. And the oil is in the engine to provide lubrication for the pistons going up and down in the cylinders, Parker.
Okay.
If you didn't have any engine oil in an engine, it would seize up and it would basically stick, and then you'd have to rebuild the entire engine.
Ooh, that sounds like a lot of money.
So let's see, where are we? Let's see level. So
Right.
we put in 3 quarts.
Yeah, around there.
So let's keep putting it in.
So is there like specific oil for specific types of engines?
Yes, and oil has these ratings. It's a viscosity rating.
Okay, so let's quickly talk about what the numbers on a jug of motor oil mean. The VW owner's manual indicates this car is designed to use 20 W50 viscosity oil in the climate that I currently live in. So what do these numbers mean? Well, the W in motor oil actually stands for winter and refers to the oil's ability to flow at lower temperatures. For example, a 5W motor oil will flow better at lower temperatures than a 15W motor oil. The higher number following the W refers to hot weather viscosity, or the oil's ability to flow at hot temperatures, such as you would find when your engine is running. The higher the number, the thicker the oil is at the engine operating temperatures. At any rate, always follow your manufacturer's recommendations when changing your oil.
Okay.
All right, so that's level. And it looks like we're right at 4 quarts. I'm going to put maybe 4.5 in. You don't want to overfill it. If you overfill your engine
Then
oil,
it will die.
then it'll bubble up, and it won't be as efficient. And look at that. That's almost right on the dot. Let's try this again. So when you check a dipstick, this is the range, this knurled port, and it'll be different for all different cars. Some cars have a mark on one and empty and full. You want to be right up to this level. Anything in between is okay, but really you want to be right up to there.
What it looks like.
And look at that.
It's oily.
Look at that. It's right up to the, probably can't see it, but it's right up to the full line. That's it. Oil change is done. That's it. Oil change is done.
Nice.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do was get into the gas tank, take a look at the fuel sending unit and the pre-pump. So to get access to those, you've got to go in through the back seat. And to do that, you've got to remove the back seat cushion. There's 2 clips that come out with 1 screw, one shown here and one shown here. As soon as you've removed both of those seat clips, the rear seat cushion just comes right out. And here's the point that you realize if you've ever ridden in the back of a Scirocco, you're sitting right on the gas tank. So once you remove the back seat, there's a simple cover with 3 screws that will allow you access right to the gas tank. Okay, so what you're seeing here are the main fuel lines, 1 main and 1 return, and a connector for the fuel sending unit and the fuel pre-pump. To access the fuel sending unit and the pre-pump, you've got to remove the lines and then go ahead and unscrew that whole assembly from the tank. Okay, once I broke the seal and I tried to remove that entire assembly, it was the unmistakable stench of rotten gas that overcame me. The tank was full of gas, even though my bore scope earlier had showed that it was empty. Oh boy, what a problem. So it was at this point when I decided to stop and regroup. And, well, that's another episode. Okay, to recap this episode of Project Scirocco, I replaced the spark plugs, the spark plug wires, the distributor cap, the rotor, the ignition coil, changed the oil, checked the air filter, and took a quick look inside the gas tank, only to find out it was full of gas. 15-year-old gas.
Okay, so that's all there is for this episode. If you like what you're seeing, I would really appreciate it if you consider hitting the like button. If you really like what we're doing in general, maybe consider giving us a subscribe so that you can be notified when I post the next video in the Project Scirocco series. Until next time, we'll see you.